The StallionEsearch.com Film of the Month is brought to you by Horse Logic. Visit them at horselogicpro.com. The most grueling weekend in all of quarter horse racing is a no-brainer. It's the All American Futurity Trials weekend. Those trials giving the nod to the 10 that will compete in the Labor Day Classic.
It's the pinnacle of the sport of quarter horse racing.
Winning the All American is the ultimate.
Winning All American's what every horse trainer, quarter horse trainer dreams about. And to be honest with you, that's always been my dad's dream, and that's something that I've always dreamed about doing also. And
everything about quarter horse racing is the All American. It epitomizes everything we try to do.
Anybody that's involved in quarter horse racing, if winning the All American ain't your ultimate goal, I don't see why you're in quarter horse racing.
For some avid fans, owners, and breeders in the grandstand, this is their weekend. This is the weekend they come to Ruidoso and have the most enjoyment, watching all these 2-year-olds go down the racetrack trying to qualify for the big dance.
This is why we buy them at sales. Some people raise them, but this is why we buy the horses at the sales, because this is the testing ground.
Everything about the All American is finding the next one, winning the next one, again and again.
On this Film of the Month, we're going to try to show you what it's like to be here those 2 grueling days of trials of the All American Futurity here up in the mountain in Ruidoso, New Mexico. It's the graveyard of dreams of these quarter horses. You can start the day sunny, tailwind, fast track. 3 races later, you got a monsoon, a sloppy track, as well as a headwind with no chance of really qualifying. It's also a place where one trainer can come with one good horse and go home a legend. It's at an elevation of over 9,000 feet at the grueling distance of 440 yards, and yes, it plays havoc on these maturing 2-year-olds. Without a doubt, this weekend you see the highs and lows of quarter horse racing. You see the agony of defeat, the horse that should have fired but didn't, or the horse that did fire and had to fight the weather. Like it or love it, it's the All American Futurity. It's the pinnacle of our sport. It's the one everyone wants to win. On this Film of the Month, we're going to try to show you what it's like to be here those 2 grueling days of trials of the All American Futurity here up in the mountain in Ruidoso, New Mexico.
Brought directly to you at the barn, Horse Logic, equine supplement products scientifically formulated for the competitive horse and chosen by top professionals in the quarter horse racing world to help you achieve success. From sail-fitting yearlings to putting powerful muscle growth into a runner, Horse Logic gives horsemen the advantage of proven supplements for peak performance. The hottest name in supplements in the quarter horse racing world, Horse Logic Professional. My voyage begins through DFW Airport, the closest airport to Ruidoso. To those who are not familiar with how most effectively to get there is through the small airport of Roswell International. Now when you get there, you will question their use of that word, international. The All-American Trials for a journalist is a grueling 2 days. Every trial race has the potential of producing a qualifier, yet only 5 horses will make it into the finals from each day, and some of the qualifiers can be stacked up in the same race. So can you imagine how many photos are taken or how much footage of non-qualifiers is shot on those days, only to be able to use footage of 5 horses each day? In years past, the trials were contested over 1 day. Can you imagine the days of 24 or so races in one single day? Now, some people say they prefer it that way. I am not one of those people. If you're familiar with horse racing at all, then you're familiar with the Kentucky Derby in Louisville, Kentucky, where 3-year-olds who've earned enough points and money on the Triple Crown Trail earn a berth into the most prestigious 2 minutes in sports. Most of those 3-year-olds competing in the Kentucky Derby haven't raced in a month or longer. Some of them didn't even make a start as a 2-year-old at all. That's a sharp contrast from the quarter horse world where the 2-year-old is king. The 2-year-olds making a start this weekend to try to qualify in the All American Futurity have ranged from 7 starts all the way down to the horse making his career debut under a jock's saddle. As far back as the old-timers will tell me, Weather and conditions have always played the largest part on whether a horse gets in or out of the field of the All American Futurity, or the All American Derby for that matter. The first post of the first day gets off at 11 a.m., an early post time to accommodate the multitude of races to be contested on that day. It also started out with a 7-mile-per-hour tailwind, a fast track, and a clear sunny weather day. Those that arrived late for the first post missed out, as right off the bat, 2 horses came out of the first race, eventually setting the benchmark of qualifiers throughout the rest of the day, as well as a horse that would ride the cusp all day on the bump for a trainer attempting to qualify into his very first All-American Futurity on his very first attempt at the Labor Day Classic. Mike Joyner, trained Tools in the Sky, rolled along the rail to post the fastest time of 21.479 to second place finisher I'm Just Special V's 21.521 seconds. Far Right, trained by Trey Ellis, came in at 21.536. The All-American Trials always seem to produce year in and year out a horse that just happens to fire at the right place at the right time. And what a time to do it in the All-American Futurity Trials. Apocalyptical Jess could absolutely fit that description. After 2 failed attempts to make it into a Futurity this summer, the apolitical Jess gelding, with a 6-mile-per-hour tailwind, rolled to victory to post the fastest time of 21.349 seconds. That's a time that would hold up for the remainder of the day, as I'm soon to show you. I can't stress enough, weather always plays a factor in qualifying on the mountain, and thus far the opening races have been almost blessed, to put it lightly, with a tailwind to push these qualifiers along into faster times. Some capitalize on the tailwind, and some don't. Race 3 of the finals did not produce a qualifier though, and even though the 4th trial included the $1 million Heritage Place Futurity winner Sunnyside, there was not a qualifier coming out of the 4th race either. The crowd on hand would have to wait to the 5th race to see another set of horses moving forward to the Labor Day Classic. The tailwind picked up a bit for the 9-mile-per-hour reading by post time for the 5th. Track announcer Robert Fox was gracious enough to allow me to peek over his shoulder.
And now Wokati on Fire battles away with his Linder 16. Then we go back to American Hustle, Miss Blue October, Wokati on Fire. Linder 16 tries to come back, and they're going to hit the wire together in the end.
After the times were posted, the first 2 finishers, Wokati on Fire and Linder 16, both ran times fast enough to go high on the board after 5 races of qualifiers. In what seems like an instant, Mother Nature begins to take over the conditions at Ruidoso Downs. Rain clouds on the horizon seem to sneak up on you, which only can feel like a cruel, twisted joke to owners awaiting their horse's attempt at qualifying. The flags at Ruidoso Downs above the tote board in the infield tell the story. A 9-mile-per-hour tailwind turns into an 11-mile-per-hour crosswind, which looks more like a headwind. And then the times begin to slow. A twist of fate leaves horses in these conditions unable to overcome the elements to get anywhere near the 5th place position, or what they call the bump. These 2-year-old runners have had so much time, so much effort, and did I mention so much money put into them in order to face an unlevel playing field, not provided by the racetrack, but instead hampered by good old Mother Nature. Race after race after race, no qualifiers moving into the top 5 after the conditions changed. But yet, 2-year-olds are still leaving it all on the racetrack, trying to qualify. And on a sealed racetrack, that is, which is what racetracks do to avoid the racing surface from becoming too boggy or a complete soupy mess from the rain. And yet the hopes and the dreams and the hearts of owners and breeders watching helplessly are being broken until the end of the day, which after 16 trial races in one day, thankfully comes to an end for those in attendance. The top 5 being settled well earlier in the day when the conditions were optimum. One such person having his hopes of All-American Futurity glory crushed during the first day was trainer Trey Ellis, contesting his first All-American Futurity trial day in his training career, only to miss out making the field by 1,000th of a second. Far Right, the 6th fastest qualifier, missed qualifying by only a whisker.
The horse fired well, he finished well down the track. We wish it had got away, from the gates a little bit better. When we saw the time of 21.536, we had to wait around all day long for the rest of the trials, and it was a real nervous day. I mean, we stayed in most of the day. We just got knocked out. I mean, to be that close in All American Futurity, I mean, I always dreamed about getting in. And to be that close, we're just hoping for a little bit better luck today.
Where day 1 conditions saw the first part of the day with a tailwind and optimum conditions, day 2 started out with an 8-mile-per-hour crosswind and the same conditions that hampered so many in day 1 of qualifying. And even though Trey Ellis trained a Guardian Galaxy fired on the right day at the right place in his career, the $320,000 Ruidoso Select yearling graduate simply could not run fast enough in the conditions to warrant a time that would most likely hold up throughout the day. The crosswind was next listed as an 11-mile-per-hour headwind for the second race and the third. And the fourth, and on into the fifth race. The fifth race of the second day showing evidence that truly these young budding superstars of the American quarter horse racing turf are still learning their craft and prone to showing their immaturity, as evidenced here in the stretch of the fifth race. The sixth race, the wind showed up even stronger, increasing to a 14-mile-per-hour headwind, and the runners continued their pursuit, trying to make the field, to no avail. And then on to the seventh with no qualifier. Flash and Roll, the fastest qualifier from the Ruidoso Futurity, contested but did not run fast enough to make it into the field. The eighth race saw times in the mid-80s, and then came the ninth race. Now, some handicappers of the All-American look for situations like this amongst the conditions where seemingly no horse is able to run the number of significance in order to jump up and qualify. This lightly raced youngster here jumps up and gets noticed. The West Giles trained Pilot Points Moon did that in the ninth, running a 21.520 to establish himself as the fastest qualifier of day 2 with an 8-mile-per-hour crosswind with Adrian Ramos aboard. Within minutes, the wind had shifted. Post time for the 10th, the wind gauge at the track had registered a 11-mile-per-hour headwind, pushing the winner's time well past the plus 22-second area. Now the following race, the wind shifts again to the 11-mile-per-hour crosswind, the same condition as the fastest qualifier, and we get another qualifier into the field with Rusty's Miracle in a time of 21.695 seconds in the 11th for trainer Fred Danley. Now those that don't know, the quarter horse world has its own Triple Crown, the Ruidoso Futurity and the Rainbow Futurity being the middle of the Triple Crown. Seen here in the middle of the racetrack in the 12th race with a 10-mile-per-hour crosswind is the Rainbow Futurity winning MM4 in the morning, rocketing to a time of 21.648 for the 440 yards, a time good enough to get him in the field in less than optimum conditions for trainer Blaine Wood, who qualified the fastest qualifier yesterday in day 1 with Apocalyptical Jess. Race 13, although visually impressive, only produced a time of 21.777 seconds, not fast enough to get into the field of the All-American. Shortly after the horses crossed the wire in the 13th, the weather shifted. Dark, ominous clouds and thunder in the west produced wind. By post time of the 14th race, the runners would see a 15-mile-per-hour tailwind. The horses in the 14th hit the wire in a time of 21.677 seconds. Moonflash numbers crossed the wire in front, but when the horse hit the wire, that's when the chaos of the day continued. And as witnessed in the 14th, havoc ensued within the first 100 yards of the race. The stewards flashed the inquiry sign at the track, and track announcer Robert Fox came on to announce a trainer's objection lodged by the trainer of the 3-horse, Joel Valeriano Jr., claiming interference in the race. The stewards deliberated for what seemed to be well over 15 minutes, reviewing the race, and after further review, the stewards had ruled that the 5-horse and winner of the race, Moonflash Numbers, had caused the interference and placed that horse last, thus removing his time that would have been fast enough to get him into the field out of the race. With 2 races to go and with rain threatening in the distance, race 15 fails to produce a qualifier going into the field of the All American Futurity. And that pushes it to the last race of the trials for the $3 million event. Those jockeys without a mount, or those trainers without a trainee in the field, are crossing their fingers with the hopes that they get one in the field in this last race, including trainer Trey Ellis, so close in day 1 and down to his last shot in race 16 with trainee, No Miras A La Luna. Before the race, the bump was 21.716, held by West Giles train Midnight Blue. To get into the field of the All American Futurity, the runners in the 16th will have to breach that mark.
Off just a step slow is No Miras A La Luna trying to come on now, and at the rail it's Asteroid Dash, and in the center of the course Bad Habit Jess, and here he is on No Miras A La Luna, and Kiss My Eagles going with them, and in the grandstand side CD's Wine and Dine, Bad Habit Jess, No Miras A La Luna, outside CD's Wine and Dine, Bad Habit Jess, No Miras A La Luna, Bad Habit Jess, No Miras A La Luna in the photo for the win, and CD's Wine and Dine, and I think Kiss My Eagle.
Glenwood train Bad Habit Jess hits the wire in front in a time of 21.664, getting him into the field of the All American Futurity. The third Wood trainee and the third Ramirez mount to make it into the field. Waiting on the announcement for the second place finisher would take a little bit of time. No Miras A La Luna finished close enough to the winner to warrant the connections to be watching on eggshells. When the time was posted, the Ellis trainee made it into the field, giving the trainee his first starter into the prestigious event for co-owners Byron Woodard and David Valdez in a time of 21.680.
Talk about the roller coaster ride of emotion.
You know, on Friday we come so close to qualifying for the fraternity. You know, we qualified 6th fastest. Everything run good on Saturday, but you know we had to wait all the way to the last trial. No Miras A La Luna, I mean, he ran a great race. You know, better than we expected, and I mean, you know, that was intense waiting on that time. You know, in the last trial to see if we got in, and you know we got into the All American Futurity. I mean, it's definitely a dream come true.
Breaking Ruidoso Downs news. News about the disqualification of Moonflash numbers from the All American Futurity trials from the steward's office in Ruidoso Downs, New Mexico, is the fact that the decision to take the horse down has been overturned. Therefore, the horse is back in the All American Futurity, going into the finals out of the second day of trials for the $3 million All American Futurity.